Hello and welcome back to Boss Battles of Wraeclast, the somewhat comprehensive guide to the various bosses in Path of Exile 2. In today's episode we are taking on Draven The Eternal Praetor, and the first thing you need to be aware of is that when you find Draven there is a second boss that you also need to kill in order to progress the storyline. So with Draven, you find him in the Cemetery of the Eternals, which is the next zone that you'll find after completing the Grim Tangle, and whether or not you took on the Rotten Druid, it's your choice whether you take that boss on or not, as he is an optional boss. But there is a second boss that you'll find in the Cemetery of the Eternals, and she is called Asinia, the Praetor's consort. So it really is your choice as to which tomb you find first. That's usually the way I do it. If I find Draven first, I kill him first. If I find Asinia first, she dies first. It really is completely your choice as to which one you take on. Now, if you want my opinion on it, I would say that Draven is the more difficult of the two bosses, as he is quite melee focused and some of his abilities do hit very hard if he gets powered up by the souls throughout the fight. So it's really your choice as to who you take on first, but I would definitely say Asinia is the more avoidable boss fight to do. She's the boss fight that you can avoid most of her abilities. But anyway, without further ado, let's take on Draven, the Praetor. Okay, so this is Draven. There is usual checkpoints right next to the boss fight room, and as you walk in, a green ghost will kind of slam into the ground and Draven will appear. Now, throughout Draven's fight, there's a couple of things you need to be paying attention to throughout the whole thing. Periodically, he will call for help from his consort Asinia, and she will appear in ghostly form and summon these 4 big circles on the floor that will very shortly explode after they've been summoned, and they will always spawn at your feet, so make sure that you're constantly moving and getting out of those circles. I'm pretty sure both of these bosses deal fire damage, or part of their damage is fire damage, so if you can get some more fire resist on your gear, that will help in reducing the damage you take. The other thing you need to be paying attention to is these green souls that are floating around the room. Now, he will periodically call these souls out, and they will start appearing at the edges of the room and slowly being dragged towards him. To stop these souls being absorbed, what you need to do is run in front of them or run into them, and they will just slam into the ground and disappear. If they slam into the ground near one of the 4 graves in the room, an ad will spawn, one of the shielded, kind of tankier Eternal Knights. And obviously you can just take those down and recharge some flasks if you need to do that. Once you have killed an Eternal Knight that has crawled up out of the ground, if you cancel another soul that's being dragged towards Draven nearby that corpse will then resurrect. And if you just walk into the soul in another point in the room, it will just go into the ground and not do anything. Now, with these souls, if Draven absorbs, I believe it's 3 or 4 of them, what will happen is his abilities will become quite supercharged. So his kind of AoE sword swing, where he fires out these kind of green fire bolts in a big circle around him, he will do that twice in a row, and it will hit a lot harder as well. You can block that attack, so it's not very difficult to avoid. But you can always tell when Draven has actually summoned or has actually absorbed enough souls, as he will do a kind of a big shout animation, and this big kind of green ring will kind of radiate out from him to the edge of the room after he's absorbed a soul. So I think it's about 2 or 3 of them in total that he has to absorb in order to gain those extra damage abilities. He does also have a melee combo that he will do. He will kind of run up to you and start swinging his sword 4 times in a row, and that will hit pretty hard if he has absorbed the souls. If he hasn't, it's not that bad, but it can knock you around a bit, so it can be a bit irritating. So as a ranged player, I would just try and keep yourself at range from him at all times. Now, one of his main heavy attacks that he will use throughout the whole fight, there you go, you can see that he's summoned in Asinia. She's summoning these 4 big circles. Now, with Asinia's circles, the first 3 that she summons are kind of moderate size. They're not difficult to get out of, but the 4th one will always be much larger in size. So I wouldn't stop to attack. I wouldn't try and tank them. If it was me, I would just run away from them every time. So as soon as you hear him call out to Asinia, just keep moving. Just run in a big circle around the room and avoid her attacks completely. You can dodge roll if you want to. If you think you're going to get hit by one of the circles, you can dodge roll, but I find that just running makes it a lot easier. Even with 0% increased move speed, you can get out of those circles just by moving. Now, with his heavy attack, he will stomp the ground, you'll hear the usual heavy attack sound, the kind of warning sound that it makes, and he will glow bright red. He will stomp the ground and you'll see this big kind of line of fire come out in front of him, and then very shortly after that, I think it's about 3 or 4 seconds, those walls of fire will then expand outwards into the room in a line. So make sure you run far enough away from those because they can hit quite hard, and if you're standing inside that line of fire before the flame walls have moved outwards, it will deal constant damage over time. It's almost like an ignite, so again, I would avoid standing anywhere near those. As soon as you see him go like glow bright red, try and move behind him or just away from where he's facing. And that pretty much is the majority of the fight for Draven. What I try and do throughout this fight, because it can take a while, his health pool does seem to be a lot larger than previous bosses, and he does hit a bit harder as well, especially with the increased fire damage. One thing I try to do is I try to make sure I'm constantly on the move. Even throughout this showcase here, you can see as a melee character I'm still constantly on the move. I'm constantly running around the room and trying to stop those souls from being absorbed, just so he doesn't get supercharged attacks constantly. But even if he does supercharge the attacks, if you're using a shield like I am, you can block most of them. It's just the big stomp attack that he does with the flame wall and Asinia's circles that you need to avoid, and then try and avoid getting hit by his AoE firebolt attack that he does as well. But yeah, that is Draven. Really not that difficult. When you've defeated him, he'll drop his memorial key piece, and then you'll also get a portal which takes you back to the cemetery, so make sure you take that portal and then go hunt for Asinia, the Praetor's consort. So, thank you everybody for watching, hope you've enjoyed, and we'll catch you in the next episode.